Welcome to the Unseen YouTube channel. This video is about the Sicilian Mafia of Italy. The Sicilian Mafia, or Cosa Nostra, also referred to as simply Mafia, is an Italian mafia terrorist type criminal society originating on the island of Sicily and dating to at least the 19th century. It is an association of gangs which sell their protection and arbitration services under a common brand. The Mafia's core activities are protection, racketeering, the arbitration of disputes between criminals, and the organizing and oversight of illegal agreements and transactions. The word mafia originated in Sicily. The Sicilian noun mafioso, in Italian, mafioso, roughly translates to mean swagger, but can also be translated as boldness, bravado. In reference to a man, mafioso in 19th century Sicily was ambiguous, signifying a bully, arrogant but also fearless, enterprising and proud, according to scholar Diego Garbetta. In reference to a woman, however, the feminine form, mafiosa, means a beautiful or attractive female. The Sicilian word Mafia refers to the caves near Trapani and Marsala, which were often used as hiding places for refugees and criminals. The genesis of Cosa Nostra is hard to trace because mafiosi are very secretive and do not keep historical records of their own. They have been known to spread deliberate lies about their past and sometimes come to believe in their own myths. The Mafia's genesis began in the 19th century as the product of Sicily's transition from feudalism to capitalism, as well as its unification with mainland Italy. Under feudalism, the nobility owned most of the land and enforced the law through their private armies and manorial courts. After the 1812s, the feudal barons steadily sold off or rented their lands to private citizens. Primogeniture was abolished, land could no longer be seized to settle debts, and 1/5 of the land became private property of the peasants after Italy annexed Sicily in the 1860s. It redistributed a large share of public and church land to private citizens. The result was a huge increase in the number of landowners from 2,000 in 1812 to 20,000 by the 1860s. With this increase in property owners and commerce came more disputes that needed settling, contracts that needed enforcing, transactions that needed oversight, and properties that needed protecting. The barons released their private armies to let the state take over the job of enforcing the law, but the new authorities were not up to the task, largely due to clashes between official law and local customs. Lack of manpower was also a problem. There were often fewer than 350 active policemen for the entire island. Some towns did not have any permanent police force, and were only visited every few months by some troops to collect malcontents, leaving criminals to operate with impunity in the interim. Compounding these problems was banditry, rising food prices, the loss of public and church lands, and the loss of feudal commons pushed many desperate peasants to steal. In the face of rising crime, booming commerce, and inefficient law enforcement, property owners turned to extra-legal arbitrators and protectors. These extra-legal protectors eventually organized themselves into the first mafia clans. In the 943s, nearly 500,000 allied troops invaded Sicily. Crime soared in the upheaval and chaos. Many inmates escaped from prisons. Banditry returned, and the black market thrived. During the first 6 months of Allied occupation, party politics were banned in Sicily. Most institutions were destroyed, with the exception of the police and carabinieri, and the American occupiers had to build a new order from scratch. As fascist mayors were deposed, the Allied military government of occupied territories simply appointed replacements. Many turned out to be mafiosi, such as Calogero Vizzini and Giuseppe Genco Russo. They could easily present themselves as political dissidents, and their anti-communist position gave them additional credibility. Mafia bosses reformed their clans, absorbing some of the marauding bandits into their ranks. In countryside towns that lacked formal constabulary, local elites responded to banditry by recruiting young men into companies at arms to hunt down thieves and negotiate the return of stolen property. In exchange for a pardon for the thieves and a fee from the victims, these companies at arms were often made up of former bandits and criminals, usually the most skilled and violent of them. This saved communities the trouble of training their own policemen, but it may have made the companies at arms more inclined to collude with their former brethren rather than destroy them. Scholars such as Salvatore Lupo have identified these groups as proto-mafia. One of the first accounts of an initiation ceremony into the Mafia was given by Bernardino Varo, a leader of the Fasci Siciliani, a popular movement of democratic and socialist inspiration which arose in Sicily in the early 1890s. In order to give the movement teeth and to protect himself from harm, Vero became a member of a mafia group in Corleone, the Fratelli, Little Brothers. In a memoir written many years later, he described the initiation ritual which he underwent in the spring of 1893. He was invited to take part in a secret meeting of the Fratelli. He entered a mysterious room where there were many men armed with guns sitting around a table. In the center of the table there was a skull drawn on a piece of paper and a knife. In order to be admitted to the Fratelli, had to undergo an initiation consisting of some trials of loyalty in the pricking of the lower lip with the tip of the knife. The blood from the wound soaked the skull. In 1925, Benito Mussolini initiated a campaign to destroy the Mafia and assert fascist control over Sicilian life. The Mafia threatened and undermined his power in Sicily, and a successful campaign would strengthen him as the new leader, legitimizing and empowering his rule. He believed that such suppression would be a great propaganda coup for fascism, and it would also provide an excuse to suppress his political opponents on the island since many Sicilian politicians had Mafia links. As Prime Minister, Mussolini visited Sicily in May in the 1924s and passed through Piana di Grisi, where he was received by Mayor Mafia boss Francesco Cuccia. At some point, Cuccia expressed surprise at Mussolini's police escort and whispered in his ear, "You are with me, you are under my protection. What do you need all these cops for?" After Mussolini rejected Cuccia's offer of protection, the Sindaco felt that he had been slighted and instructed the townsfolk not to attend the Duce's speech. Mussolini felt humiliated and outraged. Cosa Nostra is not a centralized organization but rather a loose confederation of about 100 groups known alternately as families, kosh, borgatus, or clans. Each of these claims sovereignty over a territory, usually a town or village or a neighborhood of a larger city, though without ever fully conquering and legitimizing its monopoly of violence. For many years, the power apparatuses of the single families were the sole ruling bodies within the two associations. And they have remained the real centers of power even after superordinate bodies were created in the Cosa Nostra beginning in the late 1950s. The Sicilian Mafia Commission. Membership in Cosa Nostra is open only to Sicilian men. A candidate cannot be a relative of or have any close links with a lawman, such as a police officer or a judge. There is no strict age limit. Men as young as 16 have been initiated. A prospective mafioso is carefully tested for obedience, discretion, courage, ruthlessness, and skill at espionage. Do not forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel for more videos.